From the moment he was sworn into office on September 13, 2022, President William Ruto has faced a relentless storm of criticism. His presidency began not with a traditional honeymoon period, but with immediate and intense scrutiny from the opposition, civil society, and a significant portion of the Kenyan public. The narrative quickly formed that his administration was failing, that his promises were empty, and that the country was on a fast track to ruin. The Ruto must go and the Ruto Wantam sentiment, amplified on social media and through street protests and opposition gatherings, has defined the first 2 years of his term. And the criticism is not without basis in the lived experiences of many Kenyans. The cost of living has been a persistent cause of pain to a majority of ordinary Kenyans. The immediate and sustained wave of criticism, however, raises an important question about fairness and perspective. Is it possible to deliver a definitive verdict on a presidency after just 24 months? Judging a president's legacy based on their first 2 years in office is like trying to review a novel after reading only the first few chapters. Consider the presidency of Mwai Kibaki, which began in December 2002. Today he is widely remembered for overseeing unprecedented economic growth, but his first 2 years were not without significant challenges. Similarly, Uhuru Kenyatta's first term, starting in 2013, was beset by formidable obstacles. He and his then-deputy William Ruto faced charges at the International Criminal Court, and their administration was confronted with devastating terrorist attacks. Just as Kibaki and Uhuru had to navigate the specific crises of their time, Ruto has had to confront a unique and potent cocktail of challenges: enormous public debt, global economic slowdown, and geopolitical shocks. Leadership is a long game, and history shows that both Uhuru Kenyatta and Mwai Kibaki were judged over 10 years, not 2 years. But what if we were to judge William Ruto after just 2 years, starting with the basics? A health check of the economy, inflation, the shilling's value, annual GDP growth, and export earnings. What do the facts actually say about President William Ruto's first 2 years in office? The big question is this: are we looking at a Wantam or a Tutum president? Before we actually go there, we'd like to know in the comments where you're watching this video from, the county in Kenya, or the country, for those watching from outside Kenya. If this is a topic you'd like to see more videos on, be sure to hit the like button, and subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so that YouTube will notify you whenever we publish a new video. When President Ruto took office in September 2022, year-on-year inflation stood at a worrying 9.2%. By September 2024, his administration had managed to bring inflation down to around 3.56%, comfortably within the Central Bank of Kenya's 2.5 to 7.5% target range. The year-on-year inflation stood at a much lower 4.14% when Uhuru Kenyatta took office in April 2013. By April 2015, inflation had risen significantly to 7.08%, way above Ruto's 3.56%. Mwai Kibaki's year-on-year inflation stood at a low 4.2% when he took office in December 2002. By December 2004, inflation had risen to a staggering 17.1%, way above Ruto's 3.56% and exceeding the Central Bank of Kenya's 2.5 to 7.5% target range by a whopping 10%. Think of this as how fast prices are rising in the economy. Ruto started from a much higher level of inflation but commendably managed to shield the people of Kenya from a high cost of living that could well spiral out of control. Ruto's first 2 years saw disinflation back into target, a clearer win versus Kibaki's early spike and Kenyatta's mild uptick. Despite global food and fuel shocks, Ruto has kept inflation under control much faster than many had expected. If the present trajectory holds, Kenya's economic horizon under President William Ruto looks even brighter. From March to July 2025, President Ruto's annual average inflation has seen a steady, consistent decline from 3.81% to 3.55%, a feat that already outperforms Kibaki's best record of 3.93% in January 2011 and Uhuru's best of 4.44% in July 2013. This isn't just a statistical victory, it's a signal of deepening price stability, renewed investor confidence, and stronger household purchasing power. The kind of macroeconomic foundation on which lasting prosperity is built. Under President Ruto, the shilling initially experienced dramatic depreciation, weakening especially from January 2023 at around 124.4 to 160 to the dollar in January 2024. However, the shilling later staged a remarkable recovery through February and March 2024, strengthening significantly to 129.29 at the close of September 2024. After 2023 turbulence, the shilling improved and steadied in 2024, helped by proactive Eurobond liability management and regained market access, a confident signal that contrasts with Kibaki's early period weakening. In President William Ruto's first full year, 2023, Kenya's economy demonstrated surprising resilience, recording GDP growth of 5.6% from 4.9% in 2022, driven by an agriculture rebound and resilient services. The 2024 growth cooled but stayed around the 5% neighborhood per multilaterals. Uhuru Kenyatta started with 5.7% in 2013, and then approximately 5.4% in 2014 after rebasing. In Kibaki's first full year in 2003, the GDP grew by just 2.9%, recovering from early 2000s lows. The 5.6% growth in 2023 places Ruto's first full year on par with Kenya's best starts under Kenyatta, and ahead of Kibaki's first full year, despite tighter policy and debt service headwinds. In 2024, Kenya's export earnings grew significantly, reaching over 1 trillion shillings for the first time in history, driven by strong performances in tea, horticulture, apparel, coffee, among top earners. Ruto's opening stretch is markedly price-stable with inflation tamed, market steady with the shilling stabilized, and growth resilient near 5 to 6%. The export engines, especially tea, leaned on volume gains to offset softer global prices, keeping export earnings resilient. Against the early-term baselines of Kenyatta and Kibaki, that combination gives President William Ruto a comparative rosy story anchored in hard numbers. President Ruto's administration has faced severe condemnation for incidents of police brutality, particularly during the anti-finance bill protests in June 2024. The tragic loss of life, with dozens of young protesters killed, painted a grim picture. During President Mwai Kibaki's tenure, the most devastating incident was the post-election violence of 2007 to 2008. Over 1,100 Kenyans were killed, many at the hands of police using live ammunition. The Kibaki government's long, bloody crackdown on the outlawed Mungiki sect saw hundreds of Kikuyu youth, many merely suspected of association by the manner they chose to dress or grow dreadlocked hair, relentlessly hunted down in Nairobi's poorest estates like Mathare, Kayole, and Dandora. They were seized in sweeping abduction raids, often at night, and many never returned. Others turned up as corpses dumped in thickets and mortuaries, bearing signs of brutal execution. The state-sanctioned terror reached chilling infamy when then Interior Minister John Matiang'i openly warned that the Mount Kenya region should prepare for funerals, a grim pledge that foreshadowed the wave of extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances that followed, leaving entire communities gripped by fear and mourning. The presidency of Uhuru Kenyatta also had its dark moments. The 2017 election period was characterized by violent crackdowns on opposition protests, leading to dozens of deaths, particularly in opposition strongholds. The River Yala revelations between July 2021 and January 2022 stand as one of the most harrowing chapters in Kenya's human rights history, a watery grave that slowly gave up its secrets. Beneath River Yala's deceptively calm surface, dozens of bloated, bound, and mutilated bodies were found snagged on rocks or wedged in reeds, many stuffed into sacks, their faces battered beyond recognition. Locals spoke of the sickening stench that lingered over the banks, of fishermen pulling up corpses instead of nets, and of the haunting regularity with which new bodies would surface. Each recovery told the same grim story. These were not drownings or accidents, but deliberate, calculated killings, the river used as a silent conveyor of death, a place where human life was discarded like refuse, in a macabre attempt to erase both victims and truth. When it comes to human rights and policing, President William Ruto's administration has been navigating one of the toughest inheritances in Kenya's modern history. Yes, there has been unfortunate incidents and specific flashpoints like June 25, 2024, when large opposition protests prompted a heavy deployment of anti-riot police, leading to unfortunate tragic fatalities and disappearances. Those moments rightly drew scrutiny. But the bigger picture, backed by verified independent data, tells a markedly different story from the abductions and extrajudicial killing crisis narrative that Ruto's critics now push. Missing Voices is a coalition of human rights organizations whose mission is to end enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings in Kenya. The Missing Voices Annual Report, 2024, has a historical data on extrajudicial killings over 6 years, from 2019 to 2024, that shows a consistent decline in numbers of extrajudicial killings from the year Ruto took office in 2022. By 2024, extrajudicial killings in Kenya had fallen to 104 cases, marking a 12% decline from 118 cases in 2023, which in turn marked a 30% decline from 130 cases in 2022. While the 2024 figure of 104 still reflects a tragic human toll, it stands in stark contrast to the broader trajectory of state violence. This downward shift, not born of complacency, but of cautious reform, signals that, under President Ruto, the push for accountability is beginning to yield measurable results. Even more telling, several individuals once reported as victims of enforced disappearance have later been found alive and unharmed, underscoring both improved recovery efforts and the fact that not every claim made in the heat of political protest matches reality. It is also important to note the relentless efforts by political detractors to amplify, distort, or outright invent cases to paint the Ruto government in the worst light possible. The claims involving Juja MP George Koimburi and social media activist Matiang'i stand out as cautionary examples, both instances where allegations were inflated for political mileage, only to unravel under factual scrutiny. Kenyans are beginning to see real accountability for police excesses under President William Ruto. In the Albert Ojwang case, where a man died in police custody, officers were swiftly identified and prosecuted. And in the Boniface Kariuki Mwangi case, a daylight shooting of a masked vendor in the streets, the police officers involved were promptly arrested, setting a precedent that brutality will no longer be swept under the rug. The truth is this: under President Ruto, Kenya's policing culture is still a work in progress, but it is more measured, more accountable, and more responsive to human rights concerns than it was under his two immediate predecessors. The opposition's blanket portrayal of a worsening crisis ignores the evidence, and perhaps intentionally, the progress. The competency-based curriculum had been a source of anxiety for parents, teachers, and students. President William Ruto took a bold, forward-looking step in steering Kenya through the transition from competency-based curriculum, CBC, to competency-based education, CBE, resisting the temptation to scrap reforms and instead choosing to implement and refine a system designed to equip learners with real-world skills for a modern economy. By embracing expert recommendations, streamlining workloads, and committing resources to teacher training and infrastructure, his administration signaled that education reform is not a political football match, but a national investment. And yes, challenges persist. But with the current trajectory of adjustments and support, the CBC/CBE framework is set to deliver a more practical, future-ready education for Kenya's children. The Social Health Authority, SHA, and Social Health Insurance Fund, SHIF, mark another bold, progressive break from the rot and inefficiency that crippled the NHIF, replacing a leaky, corruption-prone system with an actuarially sound, equity-driven model built to make universal healthcare truly sustainable. Already, SHA is delivering tangible impact in critical life-saving services like dialysis, where patients who once faced financial ruin now access consistent treatment with dignity. While challenges remain, the framework is solid, and as teething issues are addressed, SHA is poised to outperform its predecessor by miles, proving that health coverage in Kenya can be both compassionate and financially sustainable. President William Ruto's affordable housing program is yet another bold progressive leap toward closing Kenya's massive housing deficit, turning what was once a distant dream for millions into a tangible national priority. By mobilizing public-private partnerships, channeling investment into large-scale construction, and prioritizing ordinary Kenyans as homeowners, the program is not only putting roofs over heads, but also putting money in pockets, creating thousands of jobs, stimulating local manufacturing, and driving economic activity in related sectors. While early challenges remain, the momentum is clear. As refinements continue, this initiative is poised to transform skylines, livelihoods, and the housing narrative in Kenya. When President Kibaki introduced free primary education in 2003, its initial implementation was chaotic. Schools were overwhelmed by over 1 million new students. Despite severe initial challenges, it became one of the most celebrated legacies of the Kibaki presidency. President Ruto's loudest critics are in many ways the living embodiment of the very ills Kenyans have struggled to escape: corruption, ethnic balkanization, police brutality, and contempt for the rule of law. Far from offering a credible path forward, their policies could very well be steeped in the old, destructive playbook. Rigathi Gachagua's baggage of high-profile corruption cases and nakedly tribal mobilization, and Fred Matiang'i's dark record of blatant contempt of court orders and presiding over a police force notorious for brutality, abductions, and flagrant abuse of constitutional limits. While the Ruto government has been accused of tolerating goons carrying clubs who largely intimidated looters and stood alongside police during demonstrations, Gachagua himself, according to former CS Moses Kuria in a recent post on X, is the one who actually hired, financed, and deployed goons to the Kenyatta family's Northlands farm. And these weren't mere optics of club-waving toughs. They stole over 1,500 pedigree sheep and torched property worth millions of shillings as police idly watched. Gachagua and his so-called united opposition now parade around claiming they don't even need to tell Kenyans how they'll run government, that their only priority for now is to yank William Ruto out of power. To any sober Kenyan, that's nothing but a trap. The kind of trap Rigathi Gachagua is capable of laying for Kenyans is nothing short of a hyena's banquet disguised as a rescue mission. A rickety snare baited with sweet "Hi Cousins," Kasongo, and Wantam slogans, but underneath it lies the same old rot of rapacious corruption, tired tribal game of shareholders, and brute goon politics. The irony bites hardest when Kenyans recall that before his impeachment, Gachagua bragged about how he could lay traps all around State House to keep Raila Odinga from reaching Ruto, the very same Ruto he now swears must go. Wantam. After 2 years in office, the presidency of William Ruto is a tapestry woven with threads of ambitious reform, painful economic realities, and relentless political opposition. When placed against the backdrop of history and hard data, a more complex and nuanced picture emerges. The strong economic indicators are not the story of absolute collapse that is often portrayed with the Wantam chants. Kenya's inflation is at record lows, the shilling has clawed back stability, exports are surging, GDP growth remains resilient, and the bold reforms in education, healthcare, and affordable housing are finally taking root. The real work of nation building is only just beginning, and it demands continuity, not disruption. And certainly not the kind of sabotage where goons are hired to loot and burn supermarkets, national government offices and vehicles, police stations, and law courts. The stunning run of Harambee Stars in the Chan tournament, humbling football giants like DR Congo, Morocco, and Zambia, is more than just a sporting triumph. It is living proof that united under a common vision, Kenyans can defy the odds and conquer the indomitable. Ruto's leadership has sparked a revolutionary spirit of resilience and victory, showing that with national unity behind the right vision, Kenyans can rise from underdogs to champions in every arena. On the balance of current evidence, from taming inflation and stabilizing the shilling, to bold reforms in healthcare, education, and housing, and even the symbolic triumphs of the Harambee Stars, the verdict today leans unmistakably toward a Ruto Tudum, not Wantam. Yet, with politics as fluid as the market themselves, and with a day in politics often proving longer than a year in economics, this mandate remains tethered on performance. Should the figures shift dramatically, so too could the people's judgment. For now, however, the momentum and the promise clearly belong to President William Ruto. Data used in this video is compiled from officially recognized Kenyan and international sources, and some of these links are shared in the description below the video. If you found this engagement helpful, be sure to hit the like button, share the video widely across your Kenyan public discourse platforms, and subscribe to our channel to help us build a larger community for more fruitful future engagements. We're here on a serious mission to separate the hard facts from the petty propaganda.